Welcome to the SYRAS video guides. This guide is in addition to the set of core features. I'm assuming that you will have watched the previous 7 videos, 7 or 6, about logging in, creating projects, importing articles, deduplication, screening, and so on and so on. This is an add-on feature that you can use if you like, which is to implement a screening criteria checklist. While you're screening, you can instruct your reviewers to follow guidelines about which articles are relevant to your project or not. This tool tries to help you to implement that rather than having it on pieces of paper. So I'm assuming that you know how to set up your projects and so on and so on. So I'll skip over all that. So let's have a look at this this project I've already set up. We've got 800 odd references. We've done all the deduplication. We've assigned a simple team of 2 people to the project, to the all articles. So we're doing a single review here, which could be disagreements. Now, if you scroll to the bottom of the page, you can see a new section down here, screening criteria checklist, if I can pronounce it. And it's currently off. So if we click on that, we get a new section at the bottom here. There are 3 different ways you can run the screening criteria checklist. Either you turn it off, which doesn't really count as a as a way. You can have a plain list. You can have a checkbox list, which is actually the reviewers have to fill in before submitting each article, or it can be an optional list. Now these will make more sense as I go through them. So let's have a look at the plain list. So first of all, we have to save this option to give you the remaining tools that are needed to set up the list. So what we're going to do is we're going to display a plain list during screening. So when we get into screening, we will have a list on the top right of the page displaying the requirements. So let's add some criteria. So for example, children aged 8 to 12 in our study is relevant to our study. And a second criterion might be diagnosed with developmental dyslexia. Wow, no typos. That was the first time. Okay, and let's say published. There we go. Published between, I don't know, I'm just making this up, 1970 to 1990. Curious review, but there we go. So we've added 3 criteria to the review. If you click on one, you can change your mind and make that 8 to 13 instead. Let me just show you. I just need to keep an eye on this save button down here. I missed that a second ago. You can delete. So if you add one by mistake and you didn't mean to add this in, then you can click this button here to get rid of it. Now you can see that the save button down here is warning you that you haven't saved your changes. So let's click that, and now it's happy. So when you change this form, you need to save your changes. You can drag your criteria using these arrows here to reorder them, and again it asks you to save your changes. So if you think that the publishing is more important, let's say, or you want that as the top item, you can drag them around. Okay, so let's say that we're happy with that. We've got our 3 criteria. We want to display them as a list. Now I need to explain some of the extra switches that we've put on here. When you think about the way this works, what we don't want to happen is we don't want someone to start screening. Let's say you come up here and you open this screening set and you start screening. Now what would happen if somebody started screening and then the administrator came in and changed the criteria halfway through? That would end up with inconsistent data in the final review. So we've had to implement a locking process. This forces the administrator to finish the list. They have to think it through, get it right, and they have to lock it. So you click this button to lock before you can begin screening. And then you have to click the Save button. Now you can see here that this section now collapses, and I mentioned before that SYRAS tries to prompt you in what you need to do, and by collapsing this list it's kind of telling you that there's nothing to do here. The checklist is enabled and it's locked. We can click it to expand this section and have a look, and you can see here that this is all grey and you can't click on anything anymore because it's been locked. This is now, so the list is now locked and screening may begin. If we go back up here, we can see that the screening button is now blue. You can click it and you can start screening. If this isn't locked, let's say we unlock this and you go, I want to add a fourth criteria, we can do that. We can unlock it, and here we go. You got all the controls back and you can reorder things and so on. Now you can see that while it's unlocked, you can't begin screening. So you need to make that final choice. Now this might seem annoying, but it's necessary. You can't begin screening until you finish the criteria list. So let's lock that. Now there's one more step to this that you have to be aware of. You see, I've locked this and I unlocked it again, didn't I? But let's say that we begin screening, and this could be a collaborator that begins screening, but I'm going to show you the administrator screening. So we're going to begin screening, and I'll show you what it looks like. Now the screening criteria checklist we decided was just going to be a plain list. So here it is. It's just a list. It's just for reference. The reviewers, they can't turn this on and off. It's not part of their own settings. They're forced to see this here. So while you're screening and you've got the title and the abstract, you've also got the criteria there. This means you just don't have to have that piece of paper flopping around on your desk that you keep losing. Now, as soon as we hit one of the review buttons, and I just excluded that article. Now if I go back to the project home and have a look at the bottom here, now you can see that this has now changed because I've clicked one. I've just done one review. This is now locked and it's sort of double locked. I cannot unlock this now, and that's because screening has started. Someone has already reviewed an article with this criteria in mind, so I cannot change it. As an administrator, I can't change it. It's too late. So again, I just wanted to underline this, that you have to get your criteria right before you begin, before you allow anyone to begin screening. Okay, so let me just show you a bit more. As you go through, you're including and excluding articles, and the screening criteria just sit there guiding you. Now, let me go back and show you some of the other options. Now, to do that, I will need to reset the project. So let me import one of these random things again, and I'm going to replace all project data. The project was reset. I will just, there shouldn't be any duplicates. I just want to get rid of that little red thing there. Oh, there are some duplicates. Okay, let's get rid of them all. Okay, so we're back to, I've just reset the project. We've got 400 references, and we can now begin again. So I just threw all those ratings away that we had a minute ago. Now let's. I will now show you some of the other options that we've got available to us. The next option is a mandatory checkbox list. The best thing I can do is just show you it. So let's save that. Now let's lock this to begin screening, and now it says that screening may begin because the checklist is locked. So let's have a look at what the screening looks like. We'll open the all articles, click the screening button. Okay, so now you can see that because we've turned this into a checkbox list, there's now a little form on the right hand side here that has ticks and crosses. It has the criteria as we saw before, and they're ordered in the same way as we saw before, but now they've actually got these little buttons, radio buttons that they're called, where you can choose one of the three settings. There are little tooltips that hover over that say the three different options that you have. These are currently hard-coded, they're hardwired. Maybe in future we could have different options in there, but it seems that this is all you need to have. Was this article published between these dates? yes, no, or I'm not really sure. Now, there is actually a fourth option, which is unanswered. And this is the important difference between mandatory and optional, which is the last two types of criteria. So what happens if I try and submit a rating without filling in the entire form while in mandatory mode? Well, it won't let me. It says, please check all the criteria. So I'm forced to go and fill something in. If I don't know, I can always just put don't know for all of them. But at least I've actually specifically said that I don't know, rather than maybe have forgotten to have filled out the whole form. And now I can include and exclude. And it'll do this for every single article. So I have to make my mind up on every single article. I'm just clicking random buttons here. Okay, so this would be a painful review, because you've got to click 3 or 4 buttons on every single one, and if that's thousands, this would be a difficult thing to do. I can imagine this might be useful for training students on how to do reviews, but perhaps for a real review, this would become really laborious. One of the things we've done with SYRAS is try and make it user-friendly. We try to streamline this review process so that you can do thousands of articles, including keyboard shortcuts and so on. So having all these extra buttons to have to click on each for every single rating feels like a lot of work. So that's why we've also got the optional, the last mode, which is the optional mode. So I would like to show you that finally, which is this mode here. So I will just reset the project one last time, just to throw away all the ratings so that I'm allowed to unlock it, just for purposes of demonstration. So we'll import those, excuse me, scan for duplicates, which there aren't in that one set. Okay, so now let's unlock this. Now that we've got no ratings, it now thinks we haven't started screening again. So let's pick optional. This displays a checkbox list which the collaborator can opt to use fully, partly, or not at all. So they can tick one option, or they can completely skip the whole thing, or they can fill it all in. It's completely up to you. So let's set that up. Where it's enabled, it's locked, we're ready to go. So let's begin screening. The checkbox list, the form, it looks the same as with the mandatory mode, but now I can just tick one of them, I can leave these blank, and I can rate that article. I can fill them all in and rate the next article. Now note that I can go back and I can change my mind. So similarly to how you can change your mind here, you can go backwards and forwards. I could decide, actually I want to include this after all. I may make up my mind here, and I can select that, and now I can change my mind completely. Let's say I go back again to this one here, which I included, and I had these options. I can now change my mind and say I don't know. I now know less than I did before, and click include to resubmit that. So you can go through and you can review what you've said, what decisions you've made on each one. Remember that you can also add comments in. I think that this criteria tick boxes is closely related to the commenting, which is partly why it's been put over on this side of the screen. So especially if you were looking at an article and you didn't really know, so you've written I don't know, and you would say on here, I want to discuss this. If I could type properly, I want to discuss this because I really don't know. I don't understand these criteria, how these criteria apply to this particular article. So that's how the user will see it, how the reviewer, a collaborator, will see it. The next thing I will show you is how you will actually see the results in a disagreements review. Okay, so I've just logged in as the collaborator on this project, and you can see the collaborator's view is slightly different in a number of different ways. For example, they can't import articles, they can't invite other people, and similarly they have a slightly different view of the screening criteria checklist section as well. They never get any buttons on here, the collaborators never have any controls over this, but they get shown what type of checklist you're presenting, and they get shown the criteria in advance. So even before they can begin screening, they can come into this page and they can see that the criteria is ready. They will also see when the criteria is not ready. So if the administrator is still editing these controls here, there will be a warning to the collaborators here saying, you can't start screening yet, and this is why. It's because the administrator hasn't finished the criteria yet. It's laid out in a similar way to the administrator's page that I've just shown you, but there are no buttons, basically. Okay, so let's have a look at the collaborator's view of the screening. It's very, very similar. Just out of interest, this collaborator happens to have the keyword highlighter assistant switched on, so that just happens to be there. So here we are screening the same review, the same set of articles in a dual review. So this reviewer, let's say this reviewer is Mr. Positive and is definitely saying everything's checked on these ones. Just so that I can show you the differences. The first three, actually let's go back to article number 1 and we will say here reviewer 2. If I can type. I can't type today. Commenting on article 1. I often do this kind of thing just so that I can tell that the right comments are coming up on the right articles. Okay, so let's jump to the next one. So you can see I might fill in a few things. I can skip things as well, so I can just demonstrate different forms. Okay, that'll do for now. So I've only done a tiny percentage of that, of the overall review, but it's enough to show you how a disagreement review would work. Hopefully I've disagreed with myself enough there. Let me just check. So I have done include, exclude. So if I do the opposite of that as the administrator, I will get some disagreements. So I'm going to log out and log back in as the administrator. Okay, I'm now logging back in as the administrator. Open this project. Open the article set. Begin screening. Let's make sure that we get some disagreements on this. So I will exclude those first 3 at least. Okay, so now we have definitely got some disagreements there. So let's go back to the administrator's view. Now, in one of the other videos, I've talked in more detail about doing disagreements reviews, but basically we can do one here. You can see that we've only just begun. We've only just scratched the surface of this review, but it's enough for me to demonstrate how disagreements work. The administrator has only reviewed 3 articles. That's me at the moment, and the collaborator has screened 5, which you saw a moment ago. So let's create a disagreement set, and you can see that 3 of the articles of the overall 5 have had disagreements in them. So we can have a look at this disagreement set. So this is when you get to the end of the review process and you've looked at hundreds or thousands of articles and you go through the disagreements, probably sitting with your collaborator or at a reasonable distance from your collaborator. So let's screen that. Now you see a slightly different view of the criteria. Now, of course, if you didn't have any criteria showing, if you didn't have a criteria list set up, then when you do your disagreements review, there will be nothing here as usual. So here we are on this article, which was article number 1 that we disagreed on, and it shows that as previously, you can see that the other reviewer included this article, and you can see that you chose that criteria 1 was yes, criteria 2 was no, and criteria 3 was not responded to because this was an optional form. But your collaborator ticked yes on all of them. So you can very quickly see what everybody did. You can see that in this case I didn't know anything, and in this case there was a minor disagreement on that third one. And you can see that the comments are above there. There we go. I want to discuss this one. Okay, so hopefully that will give you a good idea of how the screening criteria could work. There are other ideas in the pipeline. For example, what do we do now while we're doing the disagreements review? Should we have another form here which has the criteria on it all over again, where we're going to now decide whether to include or exclude this article that we couldn't agree on before, but at the same time, really we need to agree on these micro disagreements as well. Now that's something that SYRAS doesn't do at the moment. Currently there isn't a way of submitting a kind of a super decision on the criteria. It's all possible. It can be developed. But it leads into a further discussion about how the disagreement set is merged back into the primary results. And that's the kind of thing we're working on at the moment. If you have any ideas, please fill in a request on the syras.org contact us page. I'll be happy to hear your suggestions. So that's the summary of how the criteria checklist feature works. Hopefully that was useful to you. Thank you.